Welcome to the Rochelle Christian Podcast, formerly the Emotional Mastery Podcast. I'm Rochelle, your host. I'm here to help you come back to your body, take charge of your emotions, and live life on your terms. This podcast is a space for raw, real conversations about what it means to trust yourself, lean into your power, and create a life that feels aligned and alive. We'll explore human design, astrology, and other tools to help you understand your unique energy. More importantly, though, we're going to talk about what it means to actually live and embody these aspects. So each week, I'm going to share stories, lessons, guidance to help you navigate life's challenges and really own your magic. So if you're ready to step up, take control, and show up as the most authentic version of you, let's begin. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This week has already been incredibly challenging. So much has been going on. So on Sunday, Mars Station Direct, which I personally, as a Leo rising, was really looking forward to. And Ceres, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, one of the asteroids I am studying moved into Pisces. And this asteroid holds the energy of like the Divine Mother. And so there's a lot of mother wounds that go with this. There's a lot of the cycles and initiations in mothering, in parenthood, in that dynamic. And mythologically, she is Demeter, which is the mother of Persephone. So if you're familiar with that story of Pluto, Hades coming up, basically stealing, raping Persephone, taking her down to Hades, and then Demeter is sort of walking the earth looking for Persephone. They were inseparable. She finds out that Hades has taken her. She begs Zeus to force Hades to bring her back, but meantime, Persephone has eaten 3 pomegranate seeds. So Zeus allows her to come back, but she has to spend 3 months, 1 month for each seed she's consumed in Hades. And so that's why we have the seasons, right? During the time when Persephone is in Hades, then we have winter, where Demeter is grieving. She's feeling the loss. She's sad. She's angry. And so nothing grows. And then when Persephone comes back, we begin to rebloom in spring. Summer is in full bloom. And then as we're preparing for Persephone to go back to Hades, we have fall where things begin to die. We begin to go into that winter phase. And so it really is a beautiful story, but it really holds this energy of, with mothering, with that divine mother energy. And when we think about Cancer, because Ceres rules the IC, and which is typically related to Cancer, 4th house, which there's nuance in there as well, but this energy of that divine mother, where we think of motherhood, it's so much more than just birth and creativity and joy and playfulness and laughter and children and fun and all those things, right? That's more 5th house energy, which your IC can be in your 5th house. But typically, we have the motherhood does hold a lot of those, right? And I'm not saying you have to be a mother to relate to this information, but this is birth. This is creativity. This is death. There's all this in this cycle. There is grief, right? There's sadness. There's anger. There's challenges, because as I'm learning with the teenager, we go through these initiations in our life. And these teenage years are one of them. And, we're going from grieving our childhood, right, into this kind of in-between phase where we have so much going on and so many hormones, and we're not quite sure which way is up and what we're doing. And we don't understand life yet. And we're working on regulating, and we're trying to understand ourselves, and we don't know who we are fully yet, right? We're not quite in that adulthood. We don't know what we're going to do with our life. We don't have a plan. And so it's like we've left this innocence of childhood behind, but we haven't quite reached adulthood. And it's this middle phase where it's confusing. And we need support. And it's also the time where naturally we are rebelling. We don't want our parents' help. We don't want our parents' support. So we kind of push them away. But it's this sort of like really sticky part of our life that's really challenging to navigate. And this really, Pisces is spirituality. It is fluid. It is immutable water sign. It is soft. It is the subconscious. It is all things unseen. It is also mental health. It is addictions. It is codependence. It's losing yourself in other people. So as Ceres sort of moves into Pisces, it just feels like this energy, right, of all of that being combined. And so, I mean, there's so much going on astrologically that we could really get into, but with the new moon tomorrow, or as this episode comes out, the new moon today, Thursday, the 27th, in Pisces, this energy is being amplified. We also have our North Node. We have so much in Pisces right now. We have our North Node, we have Neptune, we have Mercury, we have Saturn, we have the Sun, we have the Moon, we have Ceres. I mean, there's another asteroid in there too, and I don't remember which one it is. I can't remember if it's Juno, Vesta. I can't remember right now. But we have so much in Pisces right now. So again, this energy is really, really, really being amplified. And it's also, the new moon is also square to Jupiter. Jupiter is in Gemini. Jupiter doesn't really like to be in Gemini because Jupiter rules Sagittarius, so which is its opposite. And any ruling planet doesn't like to be in the opposite sign. You know, Jupiter is sort of that expanded mind. It is curiosity, it's expansion, it's the guru planet, right? I don't really like the word luck anymore with Jupiter. It is, because it's always optimistic and it's looking forward. And so I think that, you know, your perception is your reality. So if you're looking from a positive, optimistic perspective, you're creating your own luck within that. But again, we're also expanding on whatever our perspective is, right? Sometimes Jupiter like bowls along and it's oblivious to the actual pain that's inside. And when we ignore and we don't face those things, it can build up. And so Jupiter being in Gemini, yes, it's expanding social media. It's expanding our social life. It's expanding communication. It's expanding our mind. It's having us being extra curious. But again, it's not really comfortable in there. So we're seeing a lot of this energy kind of coming around. I mean, you'll hear in this episode, we talk a little bit about Jupiter and Gemini towards the end as we talk about the TikTok ban that happened last month, nearly 2 months ago now. But so the sun and the moon are square to Jupiter in Gemini, and squares are a little bit more challenging aspects. It's really a place that's asking us to take action and to do something with the energy. And so, of course, we always have options, right? We can do nothing with it and suffer or internalize it, but we can also step into action and we can use the energy to move us forward. And that's what I think the real calling of squares are. And so I don't believe that there's bad, air quoting, there's no bad, good with astrology. It simply is, it's opportunities. And so with this moon, it's offering us this opportunity to do something with this Jupiter and Gemini energy that is coming into this squared aspect with the sun and the moon. And so, you know, being a mutable water sign, being a mutable air sign, it's just having these energies that's expanding on whatever is coming up. How are we communicating it? How are we experiencing it? What are we thinking about? What are the quality of our thoughts? Which I've been talking for a long time about the quality of our thoughts. It's so important right now to really get your thoughts, I don't want to say under control, but really replacing those negative thought patterns with something more positive and uplifting. I'm reading the book, The Law of Divine Compensation, which is so, so good. It's literally everything I didn't know I needed to hear this week. And it really is about that. It is about it's rooted in the Course of Miracles, but it's this law of divine compensation. So when we are thinking positively, and I don't even like that terminology, think positive, but when we are sort of surrendering and giving ourselves up and calling in more optimistic perspectives, I guess. So there's a lot of conversation around money in the book. So one example is if say we're a business owner and we're losing our business, it's so easy to be like, well, they're taking it from me and this isn't working out and they're not paying me enough. And it's so easy to victimize yourself, right? It's so easy to put it on the outside. But when we can take control of it and just be like coming into a pause and like, if there's something, if this is meant to be, right? Like let it be. If this is meant to fall off, replace it with something greater, right? It is really the way that we view things, that it's everything, our perspective, right? That reticular activating system, whatever you believe, you will find evidence for. And as I've been navigating this week, as challenges have been coming up, it's really challenging those beliefs where I believe that shift in perspective, right? I believe, and it's sometimes so hard when things come to you or come to your door that are really challenging, that we feel like we have no control over. And it would be so easy to just kind of play that victim part, right? That's always kind of the easier option, to be like, well, it's their fault and it's this fault and this is happening to me and oh, woe is me and what am I going to do and all those things. Or we can look at it and trust and put our surrender, and just say that whatever is meant to be from this, like, may I learn something from it. May I see the cup half full. May this be a turning point in my life, right? And just sort of surrendering all of that up and allowing ourselves to remain stable in that. I'm currently taking a tarot course, and I love tarot. I've pulled for years, but I've never really studied it. So I would read from the book, or I would kind of intuitively feel what's going on, but I don't really have a good grasp on the foundations, what things mean. I just kind of would, whatever. So last night I just sat and I pulled 3 cards, and I didn't even ask a question. I just felt in my body what I'm feeling. And I pulled these cards, and it was so beautiful. And, usually I'll just pull the card and I'll read from the book. Like, that's kind of, what I do, because I get overwhelmed sometimes with trying to understand cups and swords and pentacles and all these different things. But I sat with it. I just looked at the imagery and I sat with it, and I wrote my interpretation first, and then I looked to the books, and it was really resonant, right? What was coming up for me. But it was just this energy of like, turn inside and fill yourself up with this love and let it pour out. Be stable, be secure, be confident, right? And also take chances. I had this one reverse card, and it was like, take chances, take action, do something different. And I feel like that's been a huge message. It's like coming to this place of stillness, having your beliefs, coming to this place of stillness, this calm, confident knowing. And then in that place, we're able to really take chances. We're able to do and choose things that are different. When we're in constant reaction mode, when we're constantly reacting to things instead of taking that pause, that silence, that stillness, and really taking advantage of that, we can't change. But if we can come with the pause, and if we can pull ourselves back from being super reactionary and be able to step into that calm confidence, then we can choose different paths. We can see with more clarity. We can understand things. And that's really the sweet spot of where we want to be. And it's challenging to be there. It's challenging when we're so used to responding and reacting to life. And so how can you find grace? How can you find that calm? How can you pause for just a second in the midst of chaos and come into yourself and choose something different, even if it feels uncomfortable? Sometimes I just count to 5. I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I do it. But how can you shift and choose something different, right? And again, that's where the magic is. That's the energy that I feel like is really calling for us. And with all this energy in Pisces and the new moon in Pisces, it's really a time where we can really get lost in our addictions. We can really get lost in that escapism. It is so easy to get pulled into that direction. But how can you find a way to stand firm? How can you find a way to kind of root your feet in and feel what needs to come up? Feel the feelings. Connect with your higher power. Connect with source. Meditate. Deepen your spirituality. I deeply, deeply feel that pull towards spirituality right now in a huge way. And so how can we deal with this amplified Pisces energy, right? And still be within ourselves and be home in ourselves. So with that being said, I won't take up too much more of your time here. So this episode on the podcast, I'm speaking to Blu Cameron. And Blu is a business astrologer for online business owners with 10 plus years in the online business space. In Blu's current business, they help online business owners use their birth chart to start, grow, and scale their business as coaches, consultants, or service providers. Blu also has a podcast called Strategic Magic, and we really, really dive into the Midheaven. We talk about business astrology, all the areas in your chart that you can lean into this. So this episode is really, really phenomenal. I'm so excited to share this with you. And so again, without further ado, I will leave you to it. This is the episode. Welcome to the Emotional Mastery Podcast. Today, I have Blu Cameron, who is a business astrologer. And today we're really going to be focusing on Midheaven and, of course, everything that has to do with business astrology. And I'm so excited. Business astrology is something I've sort of been recently dipping my toe in because I feel like over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been primarily concerned or focused on getting the foundations down because there's so much to astrology. Mm-hmm. So when you mentioned what you did, I was so excited because it's so fascinating to see, how it even comes up when you're not necessarily super aware of it, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to get into it. I'm going to hand you the floor for you to introduce yourself, your story, anything pivotal, along the way that's kind of gotten you to where you're at today, and then we'll go from there.
Totally. So thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. So like you mentioned, my name is Blue. I'm a business astrologer and I work primarily with online business owners, so coaches, consultants, online service providers, and I really just help business owners to use their birth chart and bring it into their business strategy. And how I kind of came into this work, I've been a lifelong studier of astrology. I feel like that's so common with astrologers, but it really is like a dedication to like a lifelong craft. I don't think there's ever really a point with astrology where you feel like, ah, you know what? I know everything that there is to know and like that's it.
Mhm.
But that's one of the things that I love about it. Just being both a lifelong student and then also being a teacher and being able to like share this information with the world and, just dive into it. But I actually fell into this after my previous business. So, formally, I've been a journalist, I've been an online coach myself, and I had a really bad burnout around 2020, 2021, and I just had to shut down my business, move back home. It was just not a fun time at all. And it got to the point where I didn't have the resources to necessarily invest in like new coaching or new like anything. I literally had like the bare bones. And the thing that I did have access to, I realized after going through like all my Google Docs and everything that I had formerly was I had my birth chart. So I began really like going back to the practice of not just looking at astrology from like the lens of like, oh, what's my horoscope, but like actually diving into everything that I've been studying and really like using myself as a case study. So I use that and I use my own birth chart to remember just like how powerful I am. And that was actually the start of my new business. At the time, I didn't quite know what I wanted to create a new business with. I just knew that like I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to have this thing and I wanted astrology to play a big role in it. And I was just sharing what I learned online. And then lo and behold, other people thought it was really cool too. So I started doing readings and it just kind of fell into itself at that point. But yeah, I think that this work, like you said, it's so powerful. And what I love about it too is that there's this level of awareness that you don't even necessarily need to be involved in, even if you don't necessarily believe in astrology, right? Which there really isn't anything to believe. It's a science, it's a practical science, right? Um, Even if you don't believe in astrology, it still will play out and affect you in real life. But when you are conscious about it and when you're able to bring it into specific things that you want to do, like building your business, it becomes this really powerful tool that anybody can utilize.
Hmm. Yeah. In your previous business, were you using astrology
I
in that
wasn't.
business or not at
Yeah, I
all?
wasn't. I was actually working in a very specific niche. I was actually a certified sex educator and I was working with other sexuality professionals with building their business foundation. So it's really interesting how like even in this business, I'm bringing in a lot of the skill sets that I've had previously. And then even before then, being a freelancer and being a journalist, like all of my skills have kind of compounded over time. And I'm still using a lot of things that I've learned from my former businesses as well as my other, business experience. But I love that I get to bring both of these sides into my work as a business astrologer. It's not
Mhm.
just about reading someone's chart and like explaining, okay, this is what this placement means, but it's also like I have the practical like skill set of being able to be both a business owner and working with other owners at different levels, different niches. So I have that ability to bring the practical and the spiritual together in this really
Mhm.
interesting way.
Yeah, I love that. Are
Hmm.
you open to sharing a little bit about your chart?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I know some people are very like close to the chest when it comes to their chart, but I think it is really important to, share different aspects, especially when you are a professional astrologer or somebody that is bringing astrology into your work. I think it is important to like share those aspects and like to share the chart, to share like what it is that is, and what's actually going on in your
Mhm.
chart. So I'm totally open.
Okay. So, okay, if we're going into the midheaven part then, like what
Hmm.
is in your midheaven? And was this something that you saw that, because it sounds like although your business now may be a little bit different, it still had elements of like the same sort of qualities, like the business aspect of it, right?
Hmm.
So is
Yeah.
there something in there that you just like naturally felt that you embodied throughout all the businesses or jobs that you've had?
Yeah, yeah. So I love this question, by the way. I feel like there are different parts to astrology that people are naturally drawn to, right? And like you had mentioned too, astrology is so vast and there's so much into it. Like we would be here all day if we were to just go over like the basics of the chart or what goes into a transit chart or looking at secondary charts. Like it would be its own like
Hmm.
series of master classes, right? So I really started when I knew that I wanted to consciously bring astrology into this new business, whatever form it was going to take. I was like, okay, what am I naturally drawn to? Because I don't want to try to like break down the entirety of the chart. That's just like too much. So, like you said, I've always naturally been drawn to business and doing business in a way that is more authentic to who we are individually and breaking away from this idea that in order to be successful, you have to follow this like 1, 2, 3 kind of like format because everybody's different. Everybody has different strengths and different paths to get to their own version of success. So that's when I realized it really clicked for me with, going back to the chart and realizing I've always been drawn to the midheaven. So the midheaven is a placement in your chart. It's the placement that I believe is most attuned to not just career, but really legacy. It is looking at your vocation. So, not just like what should you do for work, which as a traditional astrologer, if I were looking at someone's chart, the question of what should I do for work is more so like the sixth house, which rules over occupation, right? The literal thing that you do on a day to day basis, but it may not necessarily be the thing that you are most passionate about. And that distinction really like helped to make things click for me. With the midheaven, we're talking about vocation. We're talking about the work that even if you don't do it on a day-to-day basis, it's still important to you. It's still something that you will be doing no matter what. It's like that driving force, that thing that lights you up that you get really excited by. And kind of going back to what I was touching on too, it's going to be different for everybody. So no matter what, house that you have your midheaven in or what sign is ruling your midheaven, there's still so many different ways for you to express it. And that got me really excited because I'm like, okay, now we're digging into breaking away from these patterns, right? And there's so many different ways that you can now bring in your own personal story, your history, your expertise into how you are going to uniquely use your midheaven energy versus someone else who maybe has similar or the same placements as you. So using my chart as an example, I'm a Leo rising, which I feel
Me
like
too.
yes, yes, I love it. And so my midheaven is in the 10th house ruled by Taurus. And I actually have an empty midheaven house. So I don't have any planets in my 10th house. But that's okay. And then my midheaven is ruled by my Aries Venus in the 9th house, which is quite spicy. So I'm very curious where's your Venus placed, your midheaven ruler?
It's in Gemini in the 11th house.
Ooh,
Yeah, but it's with
interesting.
Chiron. So I've noticed that wounding
Mm,
coming up a lot when it comes to even like speaking or in groups of people. It's like I feel called to those places. And then I also have that, oh no, I don't fit in, kind of energy
mm-hmm.
towards it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I really love that because even that's like a really beautiful way of explaining like the differences, right? And I think that when we're talking about the midheaven specifically, it's so much deeper than just like, you know, I have a Taurus midheaven, so should I be in like I've seen like gardening, I've seen like being a banker and like makeup artist, which like all those could relate, to Taurus and to Venusian aspects, which Taurus is ruled by Venus. So that's where the Venusian influence comes in. But I think that there's also like the exploration again of like where these placements fall in your own chart and then also what is your story, your personal connection to these things. I do not have a background in any of the things that I've mentioned, so I was like, okay, that's not going to be a good fit. But how can I maybe dive deeper? So I'm really drawn to again the aspect of Taurus that is very much about like creating a steady consistent flow of things, your own structure, and really, creating a process that works for me and that other people can adopt, but is still adaptable enough to work, even if you don't have my history or experiences. And I really love that I get to do that as, a business astrologer. Again, bringing in these two aspects of like, bringing in the woo and bringing in like the magical aspects of astrology, but then also grounding it with something that is very practical and useful.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love that distinguishing between that midheaven is something you're passionate about and the sixth house is something that, like your work.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
also like my Leo rising is so excited that we have the same placements here because
Same,
like
same.
with that the Capricorn sixth house, so I have Mars there and I do notice I get really
Mm,
like when it comes to like my routine and like work, I can get like so into it. But I think that really stood out to me is that passion being held in the midheaven
yeah,
because
and that's the difference.
yeah. And
Mm,
anything that I think of like me, it's always been rooted in like health, fitness, like something in the body. And even with astrology, and I do human design as well. So like for that, I use those as tools to get embodied, to come into
mhm.
your body, which makes sense, right? With
Yeah.
that Taurus midheaven there.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that. Oh, and especially like, getting into, not too deeply because I don't want to lose people that are listening to
mhm,
this as well. But, we get into in traditional astrology, the preferences that the planets have, and you have an exalted Mars because Mars loves to be in Capricorn as well. So it's really giving that extra boost to, okay, this is definitely going to be something that you're going to feel like that connection, that fulfillment doing work that is in this realm of health, wellness, expertise, because that is where the passion is. That's where that motivation to take action is going to be for your chart versus me. I have a fallen Mars is struggling in the 12th house
oh
in
no.
Cancer, so I am not drawn to those things at all. I actually have an
Mm,
empty sixth house as well. So there really isn't any planetary energy that's like giving it a boost, but I do
mhm,
feel quite comfortable in the sense that like I have no problem getting a job or working and doing something outside of astrology in order to support my business, which is actually something that I'm currently going through right now. I have a full-time job in a completely different field unrelated to astrology, and then I use that to support my astrology work as well, and that works out for me.
mhm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I definitely notice if I'm not excited by what I'm doing in some way, I burn out so quickly. Like I can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually just like 2 weeks ago, I guess, I quit a job that was burning me out, and I
Mm.
have like my 9 to 5, I guess, my day
Mm-hmm.
job, right? Because everything else is.
Right.
So I have no backup plan. Kind of freaking out a little bit, but like I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed like how excited I am to be able to pour so much energy into everything else that I do, and it's exciting me in a way that like I haven't felt excited before. And then
Yeah.
all these little pieces, are kind of coming together. So it's really beautiful. And also the practical part of me that's like, okay, we got to figure this out though,
Right.
because
Right.
bills are coming, right?
Yeah,
Um,
totally. And how can the two come together? I'm also so
exactly.
curious what your human design type is, not to,
No,
derail
of
the
course. Let's
convo,
bring it
but
in.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm a 6'3" emotional manifesting generator.
Okay, yeah,
How
that
about
makes
you?
sense.
Yeah.
I'm a 2-4 reflector.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's
Okay. You're a
yeah.
reflector. I love that. I love
Mhm.
that. Okay. I
Yeah.
dated someone for like over a year and he was a reflector, and it was actually really challenging, that MG and reflector energy, like in a
Mhm.
dynamic, like in a relationship. I wanted things to be so fast, and yeah, he was
Yeah.
just not.
It's just like slow it down. Yeah.
I learned
It's
a
so
lot, but
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I have a friend and she's a projector. I love her down. She's a 5-2 projector too.
Mhm.
So I'm just like, ooh, girl, please. And I went to go visit her recently and her boyfriend's actually a reflector. I forget his profile, but he's definitely a reflector. And so like we were just vibing the whole time. I
Mm,
immediately was just like, oh, I'm gonna like him.
yeah.
And we're just like chilling, vibing, relaxing. She's just like, yes, I just knew that this would happen. And it's so like one of the things that I always say too is like to me, it's always very telling when folks are like, oh, I don't have reflectors in my community or I don't know a reflector. Cause I feel like this friend in particular, she has like maybe 3 really close relationships with people who are reflectors. And I'm just like, ooh, so you're like a good person to be around. Like you're
Mm,
really like, amplifying that good energy because, reflectors with that, with those all open centers, it's like we really are sensitive to like if somebody's a little weird, we're just like, I don't know, I'm not gonna be over there hanging out with them,
mhm,
Um, and so I always think that that's like super telling. And whenever I see like these interactions online, like I did have someone one time, I had an interaction with them, and she was like, well, I don't share a lot as a human design, specialist, she claimed to be. She's like, well, I don't share a lot about reflectors because I'm waiting to meet one in real life. And I'm just like, is the internet not a real place? Like, is it?
yeah.
Are we not
Yeah.
real?
Right.
But okay, sure.
Yeah. Well, I think though it is different to interact with reflectors, on social media and things like that. And
Totally,
then
yeah.
and especially the dynamic of like being in a romantic relationship where it's like consistently being in that energy. I
Yeah.
learned so much from being in that dynamic because I have met reflectors before in the online space, or I was
Mm.
actually in Mexico and I met a 6'3" reflector. And I was like, am I gonna meet myself
Yo.
here?
Right.
But it was I feel like she was like the me I would be if I like didn't have kids and I could just like
Right.
freely travel the world and be
I
in
love
my
that.
like my north nodes in the ninth house, so like that energy.
Yeah.
But no, it's really beautiful energy. And like I
Hmm.
out of curiosity, because this is what I've noticed with
Hmm.
him, was like, if you do you feel like as a reflector too, like you have an ability to actually protect your energy like a lot more than like when you read the
Yeah.
books, they're, oh, you're so open and they're so sensitive, and I just
Right.
don't find
Yeah.
that to be necessarily true. Like I
Yeah.
know
Like
that
they
you
make it
are,
seem like we're just like, woo, like just
yeah,
like
just
taking
like
in
laying in
everything.
bed all
Yeah.
day and
Absolutely not.
yeah.
Absolutely not. And I think that this is where like a really beautiful space can come in where like astrology and human design can meet and kind of like support each other as like sibling systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is not my experience at all. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, I definitely move through my own process. And the best way that I can explain it is like the literal moon, right, has a very long process, but it's consistent, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
moon goes through a 28-day process every single month. It will fall through all of the, it'll fall in all the what am I trying to say? It'll go through all the different phases. There we go.
Yeah.
I can get it out. And it'll move through all of the signs in astrology as well every single month. That takes a lot of energy. I think people really underestimate like how much energy that really like truly takes up. But that's going to be the same every single month, maybe in a different order, maybe it looks in a different way, but it's going to be, it's going to come up next month, just like it came
Mm-hmm.
up this month. And I find that for me and other reflectors, like we all have our own patterns, but they just look different there. And I think that that's where the disconnect can come in for non-reflectors, like the struggle to understand what that process looks like, because it's not necessarily like, oh, okay, on day 16, like this is what I'm going to be doing. It changes for
Yeah.
me every single month. But I notice that I fall into the same energetic cycles of like 1 week, very similar if you're somebody that menstruates or has a period, like you'll have these weeks where you're super high energy, right? Where you're really excited, you get a lot of stuff done. You'll have weeks that are lower energy, right? Where you need to conserve because your body's just going through a lot. You need to prioritize resting. It's That's like the best way that I can describe my personal energetic cycle
Mm-hmm.
in alignment with being a reflector. But also the second part to your question too, like I've learned over time to like protect my energy in different ways as well. So like I mentioned, I have a day job unrelated to astrology where it's very people focused. I'm like interacting with people all the time. And so I've had to learn, like, especially how to conserve my energy, how to like navigate within this space and still honoring, my own energetic cycles and like all this. And also the personal boundaries that I have to have as a business owner with a day job as well. It's like, do
Mm-hmm.
I, am I going to be bringing my business into my day job environment? No, like most of the time, honestly, I don't even mention it, to be honest. And that's like my boundary that I have that works out best for me. So yeah, I've definitely had to learn how to navigate both the energetic cycles and then also like what these interactions look like, because I know I don't have the capacity to be at 100% in every single environment, right? But that's just what works for me. Um, Other people may be different, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense too. And even when we think of like cycles, like the female cycle, it is attuned to the moon as well. At least
Yeah.
I've noticed for myself, right? Like all
Yeah, totally.
so yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think also being an astrologer who's aware of all of this,
Mm-hmm.
really allows you
Yeah.
to then like track it and take notice of that and be able to, because I mean obviously I'm not a reflector, but like I still will
Mm-hmm.
try and look at the moon and like what sign it's in, or like obviously what phase it's in, like as I'm just journaling, in the
Yeah.
morning every day, just to be aware of like certain time, like when the moon is in Scorpio, that's always intense for me.
Yeah, yeah. I have a friend, she like completely, she's like, don't call, don't text, the phone is on, do not disturb. Every single time the moon is in Scorpio. And I'm like, I respect it. I get it.
Yeah.
I'll see you in
Yeah.
Moon in Sagittarius. I'll see
Yeah.
you. But
Love
yeah,
that.
yeah. No, I've definitely noticed the same thing too. And like even the boosts with like astrology of like, okay, when my moon is in Virgo, so whenever the moon is in Virgo, I'm just like, oh, okay, like we're outside, I want to be
Mm,
social, I want to be seen, right? Even when the moon is in Leo too, I also notice that natural boost when it's transiting the first house.
mm-hmm.
I do tend to be more forward facing, want to like be more like post more on social media and connect more with folks than when, moons in Cancer, for example. Like to me, that's sleepy time. That's
Yeah.
recharge time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you had anything in Virgo in the second
Mm-hmm.
house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your moon.
And it's so funny like talking about these placements out loud because I feel like if you know, you know, but also if you
Yeah.
don't know, it's just like, what does this mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is, I think this really interesting connection because we have mentioned the sixth house as well. With being a Leo rising, Virgo is ruling over both of our second houses. And so
Mm-hmm.
having planets that are there in these wealth houses, the second house, the sixth house, and the 10th house, do play, I think, a major role in the shaping of like what business and career kind of looks like for our own personal trajectories. And for me, I think it's really interesting having my moon there because there is this like emotional element or just like personal satisfaction, I would say, to like what I would like my work to look like long term. And I do feel like with the earth element just like ruling all my wealth houses too, there's again this really nice appreciation for what is practical and like useful for people. I never want to be that astrologer that is like so deep into my work that I can't ground it for people, right? And folks can't connect to it because to me I feel like what is the point of learning all of this if it can't be practical and useful and actually truly help people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important. Yeah, that second house for me has always been a bit of like an anomaly, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Like,
Mm,
because I have a T square with
mm-hmm,
Gemini, Pisces, and Sag, and so it's like
mm-hmm.
that second house Virgo, I have nothing in it, and so
Yeah.
I've really tried to understand, other than the basics of how that would show up for me in relation to like business, right? Like I know like organization, like all those Virgo things, which are actually sometimes a little bit more challenging for me, which
Mm-hmm,
would make
mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah, right.
There's like
Because it's
pressure there.
yeah,
I'm like, there's nothing there, but it's like
right,
it
right.
wants to be, but there's not. Um,
Like phantom energy almost.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
pulling. But going back to that midheaven, would you be able to maybe like really shortly just kind of go over, even if it's just like elementally, like what an earth sign would be like, air
Yeah.
sign, fire sign?
Yeah, totally. So the way that I connect to the midheaven, and I think elementally may be a good place to start, right? Or actually, let me back up and like my thought process with like walking clients through the midheaven and understanding it, right? So first, I really like to dig into like what is a sign that's ruling it, because to me that is giving like the most prominent energies that we're going to be working with, right? And then I think elementally, this also plays a role because the elements do have their own specific strengths, right? So, let's start with Earth midheavens, right? These are going to be the folks that are going to be really good at building something that is very practical, very useful, drawn to something that can be quite literally grounded. If we think of Earth, right, it is well, it's grounding. It is, consistent as well. So finding that thing, maybe not just in the ways that, like, what am I consistent with, or what is the thing that I can, speak on time and time again, but like, what is something that maybe like you keep coming back to, are always like drawn to, right? In different ways. Can it evolve over time? Is it something that you feel can be the core focus of your body of work, right? I would say air midheavens, right, are really, really good at having that social element, right, and being able to draw people together. I also see this a lot too with folks that have their midheaven in houses outside of the 10th house, specifically the 11th house. I see this quite often as folks being really good curators or like community organizers, just like really good at bringing folks together around a shared cause or a shared idea, right? Something that is really important to a group of people. And so with these folks, I tend to see that they're really, really good at like not curating, I guess, like a hierarchical business. Like they're not necessarily going to be the ones that's like speaking down to people. They want to bring people together. They want it to be this like community feeling. I feel like I'm using a lot of adjectives, but y'all get what I mean. Like
Yeah.
they want it to be very circular rather than very like top down. They don't want to feel like they're speaking at people, but they want to bring people together around an idea that is perhaps bigger than them. And then folks are really drawn to the specific ways that they're doing it, right? Fire Midheavens, I think more than anything, Fire Midheavens are really, really good at being fitting into this role of being a traditional leader, right? So they're able to take center stage and like are drawn to, ways that they can bring in natural attention, just by sharing what it is that they're passionate about and what they're drawn to. And I think that the challenge for Fire Midheaven folks specifically is like honoring the fact that they need to go first. Like they don't need to wait for the permission from other people or even like the validation of like, wow, that's a really good idea. It's like if you have the desire to do something, especially as someone with a fire midheaven, then it's like that's your signal to do it. And then other people will follow. And then water midheavens are really good at bringing in that connectivity and that sensitivity to the work, which is also like quite needed for something to sustain over time. So I often see folks that have like water midheavens, they may change different modalities, they may change like what it is necessarily that they're focused on in their business and may take different shapes, different forms, but they're not afraid to like experiment and to just like try something even if it quote unquote fails, like they're able to bring that information into the next iteration of their work. And then also really creating a business that thrives on like intimacy and connection with other people. Like I don't really see these folks like doing their best work in silos where they're like separated from other people. They need to be in community and connection with the right people. So kind of different from how I see air midheaven folks working, where they can operate in a larger group. Water midheaven folks I see really thriving in like more intimate, closer knit spaces and really taking the time to cultivate and protect who is actually part of their community and who they're working with.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's like general overview, right? But then there's also so many other elements that go into it as well. Like I mentioned, the house that your midheaven falls into, if you have any planets there, that also plays a really big role. If you have a stellium there, so if you do have planets and if you have three or more planets in the same house as your midheaven, that's a lot of activity going on. And then also where your midheaven ruler is, so the planet that rules your midheaven sign, where is that placed in your chart and how does that also play a role in like what your vocation and your legacy can look like for you. Yeah.
Hmm. You mentioned the midheaven in the 11th. What would be significant with it, like maybe in the ninth?
Yeah. The ninth, I definitely see more as like I always have this image of like the Hierophant in tarot when I think of the
Mm.
ninth house. So, like, literally the teacher, the guru, the one that is like, I learned this thing. This is what I'm sharing with the world. They are the ones that are, they're speaking, they're teaching, they are literally publishing. The ninth house ruling over publishing. And then also being the house where the sun rejoices. It loves to be in the ninth house. So, like, I always think about the sun and representing our vitality, what it is that we are drawn to, what gives us light and excites us, right? If you have your midheaven in the ninth house, it's like, how can you bring these things together? How can you, create a business that is centered around your perspective and like what you feel literally lit up by, um, and what you want to share with the world. And then also, I think this is the house that I believe is most connected to like traditional ways of like online business. So like the coaching, the consulting, the like course creators, the publishing the ebooks, like the literal sharing of information, right? Can in a broad way, I think is connected to the ninth house. And like these avenues would be really good use of your midheaven energy as a way to like share that information with the world. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then sorry, I had a brain fart for a minute. And then at the same time, I often get this question too of like, what would the 10th house represent as well as its own house? Um, so like, what the midheaven represents and what the 10th house represents on its own are very similar, but I often see them like conflicted, right? And like confused. But the 10th house on its own, right? It's one of the angular houses, so it's always going to be a house that is more prominent for us in our birth chart. The first, the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th house are always going to be more active, right? Houses in our charts, regardless of like what placements you have there. And then the 10th house, whenever you have your midheaven there, right? It very much is this connection to like your your legacy and what you were able to build over time, because the 10th house is a very like culmination house, at least the way that I see it, right? It's building from the lessons that you've learned throughout houses 1 through 9 as well. So the more that you're able to build this over time, it's not a fast moving house. It's not necessarily a house where you're going to get that instant gratification, but it is something that like is really considering, okay, what are you building through the work that you are putting in over time. And so I really believe that like when you have a 10th house midheaven, it's really drawing you to like do the work, which sounds so boring and like nobody wants to do that, right? Like we want the quick answers, but it is like the success that you're looking for is in the work that you're willing to put in right now. It's very Saturnian as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just like the energy that it gives, because it does rule over like success and like career and the like victories that you have gained over time, right? It requires you to like be committed to the work that is needed in order to move up that mountaintop. Like whenever I think of like the 10th house specifically, it is like this image of like being on a mountain, but like you're not in the process of climbing it, you're already at the top, right? But like what is it required from you in order to prepare to make that trek from the bottom? And then also like what challenges have you experienced on your way to the top of the mountain to gain that victory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how much more satisfying it is when you do finally reach it and you have overcome everything despite the challenges that have come your way, etc.
Yeah. And I feel like having an Earth midheaven makes that a little bit slower too, at least
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
personal experience.
Oh, same. Yeah, like I
Yeah.
definitely feel like there's an interesting like juxtaposition, because my like I'm a Pisces sun, so
Mm-hmm.
my sun is actually in the 8th house. So there is always this like push and pull for me of like both what's, what feels fun, what feels like magical, and what like draws my attention, because my sun is quite literally over here in a water ruled sign. And then also like what is the path, what is the process to like get there? And I feel like it's definitely taken me personally a little bit more time to get to where I am now, but I also feel like I needed to take like the long way around in
Mm-hmm.
order to get to this point, because now I have all this experience and all these different things that I can bring in outside of just astrology, right? Which I think makes me a better astrologer, because I have all these different experience points and all these different, ways of viewing the world and experiencing the world in real time that correlate back to how I can explain and how I can like live through astrology. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just out of curiosity, what degree is your sun at?
Mm-hmm. 18.
Okay, 18. My Jupiter's at
Yeah.
17. I was just like,
Okay. Oh,
I was
so
just
close.
curious.
So close.
Yeah. Yeah,
No,
that's
I'm
a lot
loving
of
the
different like
similarities.
I know,
Yeah.
right? That's why I asked. I was like, it's so interesting. And to have those like water, earth, and fire like all in
Mm-hmm.
your big three is really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And having an opposing sun moon too is like,
Yeah.
oh my. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah. I also noticed too, I was just looking at my chart the other day and I was like, I think I saw like a clip or something where someone was talking about like the element that you have least in your chart. And I was like, oh, my chart
Hmm.
is actually pretty like well balanced. Like I have a good representation of each of the four elements. Very Avatar, the last
Yeah.
airbender of the
I
chart.
love
But
that. Mine's
yeah.
really heavy on earth and fire and I have
Mm,
very little air and water. I think I have more.
interesting.
Yeah, I can't remember which I have least of. I think it's water. Yeah. But
Mm,
anyway,
hmm.
so
Yeah.
I've noticed that energy is a little bit harder for me to like obviously like bring
Totally.
in my own practice. I do have like a bit of a selfish question here. Is there any
Yeah.
significance to the midheaven being at either like 0 or 29 degrees? Like other
Yeah.
than, it just being critical degrees, but
No, I actually love this question. I personally use traditional astrology, so I don't focus so much on degree in the sense of like degree theory.
mm-hmm.
But I do feel like, at least to me, like just intuitively with the chart, I think that there is this significance in the sense of like, okay, is this speaking to like your level of like maybe comfort with the chart? So I have noticed like from my own readings, clients that do come to me and they have very early degree midheavens in a sign, like they're not very comfortable. Like they'll be the clients that have like the questions of like, I don't really understand how to use this. I'm not comfortable with this, or they just straight up don't relate to their midheaven at all, which is also a very common thing um that folks experience, right? And then at the same time, folks that have a very late degree midheaven, they're maybe more comfortable with it, but they tend to maybe want more like strategy and like consulting around like different ways to apply it or to shift from like the current state of business that they're in into the next state. Like, how do I, like, these are my ideas for evolving my business, right? Like, I'm curious about like what that looks like applying the energy of my chart to, grow my business in this particular way.
Mm-hmm.
So those are like the practical ways that I've seen like my clients like come to me with those placements. But overall, like it's still going to be like an awareness of the energy of that chart, just I think like at a different level. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mine's at 0 degrees.
Hmm.
That's why I asked.
Of
But
course.
that definitely resonates. And I have
Yeah.
Pluto conjunct my IC in
Mm.
Scorpio. So it's like I feel like, and it's square
Yeah.
my moon. So there's just like so much pressure and
All this
intensity. I
pressure.
feel like,
Yeah.
yeah, when it
Yeah.
comes to me embodying like that part of my chart and really like stepping into that, it's just like this slow burn, I feel like. And it's like the
Yeah.
more I come into myself, the more I feel that kind of like blossom a little bit more, which makes sense.
Hmm. And it's also, I think, like a pressure between like this perceived idea of what success can look like in that way, and then what it
Mm-hmm.
all like very clearly looks like based on your story and your experience and like what the natural trajectory of your chart and your lived experience actually looks like too can also like be very pressurized due to squares, I've noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Uranus was just on my sun, and I literally was
Ooh.
like, I
Yeah.
am throwing it all away. That's
Yeah.
literally what I just did. I'm like, I'm throwing it all away. I'm burning it all down,
Surprise.
and we're just
Yeah.
figuring it out from here, which is very
Hmm.
obviously 6-3 Uranus. Like everything that's happening in my chart, I shared my chart with a friend, and she was like, oh my God, I didn't realize how much you have going on right now. I was like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
definitely feeling it. Like I just want to run away to like an island and come back when it's done.
Yeah, no, it's so, yeah, I was just talking to someone too about like Jupiter and Gemini. We're just like, yeah, this is a
Mhm.
really long, this transits feel like it was 25 years long, honestly.
Yeah.
And and it's so interesting, like when it first ingressed, like people were super excited about it. I was really excited about it.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh wait, to get to the fun stuff, we actually have to like go through all this as well. And then
Yeah.
also considering like Jupiter like hates being in Gemini. It's
Yeah, I
like
was
it's
gonna say
constricted
that.
too. So
Hmm.
it's like it doesn't, it's not quite able to do all the fun things that like we naturally associate with Gemini energy and even mercurial energy too.
Yeah.
It's like in order to get there, like, okay, what do we have to lose or even struggle through in the process? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. What else can people look at when they're looking at their chart just from like a business perspective? I know a lot of the
Yeah.
listeners are entrepreneurs, are working or have a side business. And so
Hmm.
I think this is definitely a topic that is definitely of interest.
Yeah, yeah. So once you navigated like the midheaven, and I would say in terms of business astrology, the midheaven is the best place that I would recommend to start with because it helps you kind of understand more of like that North Star energy, right? Of like where like to actually focus and like what the end goal actually looks like for you, right? So once you actually have that in place, then I would move to the second house, which we've talked about earlier. And the second house really does point to material possessions. It's like the things that are material and immaterial things that are important to us. But in terms of business astrology, I really like looking to that for offer development and like the things that you should be monetizing in your business that are going to come most naturally to you, right? So we both have Virgo ruling our second house. So those elements, yes, of like organization, but like in terms of business astrology, right? It's like diving a little bit deeper into that, not just like how can I help my clients organize their business, but also, right, like how can I create like a clear, consistent process for my people to follow, right? And maybe that looks like creating a course around your area of expertise and like giving them the actual steps to get there. Um, Another astrologer could have an astrology course, right? I think that would be a really good use of like second house Virgo energy specifically if you were to create an astrology course on like maybe the basics of astrology or like your branch of expertise on astrology, just like showing people exactly like, okay, here's what this means, like doing the interpretations for them, making it very like practical, useful. I love those adjectives for Virgo because it just
Hmm.
like makes sense in my brain
Yeah.
of just like the more actually applicable the work can be for your folks, like with in general, like that's how you know it's going to be successful. And then making it as easy as possible for them to like get it, right? But that's really what the second house to me represents within like business astrology. It's like the things that are going to be easiest for you to monetize. And then of course looking at like the planetary energy that's there, etc. You can go really deep with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also looking at the sixth house as well, which on top of ruling over occupation, right, this also can represent like the systems and structures of what you need in order for your business to succeed. So it's like filling that gap between like the second house and the 10th house, or wherever your midheaven is specifically, of like, how do I actually get there? How do I actually like help my business to get to this place where I am fulfilling this vocation? It's going to require you to have some sort of system in place, right? But that may look different for you. So like for example, if you have like a water ruled sixth house, right? You're definitely not going to be like the person that needs to be in the weeds in your business. Like you definitely do not need to be the one that's like scheduling out the emails and like doing all that. Maybe that requires you to like think about your next investment being like some sort of technology, maybe AI, right, to assist you in running your business. Or maybe it's literally hiring like a real live person to assist you with running your business as well. But it's like you do your best work when you're able to, be out of that like day to day monotonous structure, and you're able to like take your energy into the actual creation and interaction of your offers and like being with your people rather than like sending and scheduling emails that doesn't like quite excite you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really love looking at the wealth houses and how they all work together, as well as the individual energy of that to help structure the business foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like something that you said before or touched on. I think it's really important to sort of just redefine what success even looks like for you, because I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people are chasing an idea of something that was set out before them that they think is what they want. And when it comes down to like really in the chart, sometimes there's resistance to that, to like
Yeah.
really embodying that, or I guess how to navigate or how to get it, right? How to achieve
Yeah.
that. And I think that these placements really can help you sort of feel into what's coming up for you, I guess, or
Yeah.
or how it
No,
would show up for you.
no, I completely agree. Like I get a lot of clients that are like, it gets to be this easy. Like it should
I
be
love that.
harder, but it's like, no, like it can be this easy. Right. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of times, speaking for myself as well, like we can get in our own way because we have this preconceived notion of what success needs to look like based on other people's definitions. And it's like that's exactly what led to my burnout. I was in this state of like, I need to grow in this particular way, not realizing that I actually didn't need to grow in that way. And then my business became like too much for me to actually, manage, to the point where my only option was to shut it down. And I think we're
Mm-hmm.
also seeing that a lot too right now with the current transits. Um, as well as just like the state of online business. Like people are really scrambling. They're hungry for new solutions, and they're tired of even like traditional social media and traditional ways of operating with online business being the only options. And also, like it's not even a guarantee anymore that like if you use these traditional systems that you're going to naturally get like the results. If you have, you utilize Facebook or Meta in general, right? There isn't a guarantee that you're even going to reach the audience that you want to reach versus there isn't that guarantee if you go and create your own blog or your own decentralized social media platform, but you do have more control over the ways that you're able to market and sell your offers too, and have them actually reach the people you want to reach. So it's like, we're in this really interesting time, both astrologically and just like in the state of the world right now, where I think we're all going to be forced to make some maybe challenging, maybe difficult decisions of what we want the future to look like, and what we're willing to, do about it, how we're willing to get there, and what we're willing to sacrifice in order to get there, which I know sounds really, really heavy, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about Pluto and Aquarius so much with
Mm-hmm.
everything that's going on. And it's like, again, in order for us to get to this vision for success in the future that we want to get to, it's going to require the crumbling and the destruction of what's kind of in the way, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, what does that look like on an individual level? But then also, what does it look like for on a collective level as well? Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, even like this weekend with the whole TikTok thing, I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
very quick, but I think that it did show a lot of people how quickly it can be taken from you. And
Totally.
just like, I feel like it was very much that 29 degrees of Capricorn, like
Yeah.
just that last power play of like,
Yeah.
I'm going to take it and I'm going to give it back. Right. Like, it's just,
Mm-hmm.
I think with Pluto and Aquarius, again, yeah, it's showing us the things that need to change and the things that like aren't working. And that was like, I don't know, it felt, I mean, it was big for a lot of people. I'm not really
Mm-hmm.
on TikTok, but I feel for people that were. I mean, I
Yeah.
like me, my whole thing is emotions, right? And I just like felt so like the intensity of their emotions for like this platform that's now being taken away where they've created like their life, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And
But
I'm like semi on there, but like the thing for me, I think that this is, all I don't want to scare anybody, but I think this is going to be the thing that like radicalizes a lot of people because it is back, but it is drastically different. We're already seeing like we in general, like I'm including myself in that, like there's already so much massive censorship that's happening for folks in the US
mm,
with the return
on
of the app.
TikTok,
Yeah, on
mm,
TikTok, like quite literally like people having clips of the inauguration, literally just screen recording the clips. They're not adding their own commentary, like videos being taken down, like being flagged, accounts are being deleted. Like it is not the same platform that it was before the app. And I think that that's the shame in it too. Also, the
yeah,
fact that like, yeah, how much that it put into the economy, how many people were able to, not just create their own businesses, but also to just have a platform in a community to share their truth and to connect with other people who also value the same things that they value. Like we're going to get more of that with Pluto and Aquarius over the next 20 years, and technology is definitely going to be the path to get there, but I think it's, again, my personal, thought on that is there is going to be this real shift on, do we leave traditional platforms behind? Do we leave behind Meta and like all these other platforms altogether? Or do we go all in with like decentralized, platforms, which is something that like I've been personally researching a lot. And I'm not quite sure like if the answer is going to be just going cold turkey and like leaving it all behind. I think for the time being, there is going to be this space of like maybe being on an in between space, right? A lot of folks are shifting to like, I call them social media light platforms, right? So like Substack, YouTube, places that aren't
mm-hmm.
traditional social media, even like a resurgence of Tumblr, which I think is quite
Hmm.
interesting too. Um, but like this nice space in between like social media of the past, but it's also not 100% offshore, off like decentralized social media as well. It's like getting people acclimated to the idea of like, this is the future state of the internet. This is the future state of online business, and like where even online business fits into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is also a question I think we're going to start seeing, possibilities of the answer to in the coming years. But it is going to be, like it's going to come down to, I think, a mix of individually people taking a stand of like, what are your values? What are the things that are important to you? Aligning your business to these sites, right? What we've definitely seen with current events, it's like, are you willing to like be uncomfortable? Are you willing to vote for your own best interests? Are you willing to use the tools that we have access to um in order to, make your voice heard and to like reach the people that you want to reach? And then also, if that doesn't work, what's next? What happens then? So,
Yeah.
yeah. It's what my last thought on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's, a lot of people also look to astrology because they want answers. And I know people were like pissed at astrologers that were like making these predictions that didn't necessarily come true, right? But it's like astrology is meant to be this tool of empowerment. It's meant to like give you information to make your best informed choice. It's not meant to be, it's not fortune telling, it's not
Mm-hmm.
like seeing the future in like a crystal ball. It's there to like give you information and also help to realize that like we are all in this together. We've also like gone through, yes, it's unprecedented times, but like astrology is all about patterns. So it's like, where have the patterns like played out in the past, and how can we use that to inform us of like what the possibilities are for the future as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And even when I think about human design, you have like open centers or undefined centers, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like the potential for,
Yeah.
trauma, or there's always a range of what could happen there, right? It could
Yeah.
hold the potential for this energy, but you might have had a beautiful upbringing and it doesn't manifest in that way, right? So I think
Totally.
even with same with astrology, and like you said, it is repeating history. It's just like watching what's happened through history.
Yeah.
And also I think we do have control and power over what happens, at least within our own beings, right? And so I
Yeah.
think that's something that I know I've been talking about, is just like coming into yourself with all of this, because it's like if we can't be grounded in here, then
Mm-hmm.
we're just gonna be so far out, in our minds
Totally.
and what we take in, and it can be, I mean, I think it's already challenging, and it's how challenging are you going to allow it to be, in your
Yeah.
mind, and not to ignore what's happening, but yeah.
Totally. Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like how much impact can we really have on the world if we don't take care of ourselves first,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then once that's done too, because there is a balance to everything. It's not like a balance between taking care of yourself and then also like just being completely disconnected from what's going on, right? There is like that balance. And then also, like, what does that look like for you in your capacity, right? It's not going to look the same. Like, not everybody's going to be on the front lines, like, literally marching in like real time, because that's just not the reality that we live in, right? And that's, I think, the other aspect to this as well, like the future and like Aquarian energy, I think is so like on point for the time that we're in right now, because it's like everybody has a role to play. Like I always have this like joking around of like, yeah, everybody brings something to the table, but like really though, everybody brings something to the table, something different, right? So it's like if you're not going to be the one that is necessarily like best suited to like be on the pulpit and like speaking out loud, like can you be the community organizer? Can you be the one that is like helping to bring people together? Are you going to be the one that's going to help, you know, stop the infighting, right? So we can all get on the same page about what actually matters and organize in that way. Are you going to help build the new platforms that we're going to be using for organizing and community gathering, right? Like there's so many different roles that we can all take. Um and it doesn't just have to look like one thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, knowing that helped me so much, because I think that we have this idea of like what it means to fight for something or to stand for something, and it definitely looks different. And of course, all those Taurus, like second,
Yeah.
10th, and sixth house
Mhm.
Earth energy, right, is going to be more practical and like grounded in that.
Yeah.
And that's why we have like the different elements. You have the fire and the air, what I mean. So
Mhm.
if we're all working together, we're doing our part
Totally.
that we're designed to do, and we don't have to do anything outside of that. And you know,
Yeah.
but I guess like wrapping up too, like my final question, I don't want to go like too far over time, but like my final
Mhm.
question was like, how do we take this information and like practically apply it to like our, if we have a business or just
Yeah.
the job that we're going to.
Yeah. I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give folks is to look beyond just like the definitions, right? And to put even like get permission to put your own spin on it as well. So like we've been talking a lot about earth sign energy, right? And like what does practical and grounded actually look like for you? What does it look like for you to have something be tangible and useful, right? Like there's so many different ways that you can apply these adjectives. I'm showing a little bit of my journalist hat, but it's like there's so many different ways that like you can use these words in so many contexts that they can be placed into. So don't be afraid to bring in your own lived experience and like outside of the chart, outside of even the online space, what are you naturally intuitively drawn to, right? Like what has been your experience with these things? If you're somebody that's like, oh man, like I've really struggled with like finding a process that really works for you, right? So maybe like practical and useful for you is having the space and the ability to move things around. If our work is like using an analogy, right? But if our work is a room, right? Like do you feel comfortable enough to like rearrange the furniture in order to have that process work for you? Like you can do that. It
Mm,
is your business first and foremost, right? And again, using astrology as a tool, just like anything else that you have within your business. So it's not, I would never advise anybody to do something or not do something based on the astrology. Like, oh, Mercury's in retrograde, I'm not going to do this thing. Like, I would never say that, right? So instead, it's like, how can you, again, like use the information of astrology to help make better, more informed decisions to improve your data bank, perhaps? Um, and then my last piece of advice is to like live it in real time. Like you're not going to have any absolutes with this until you actually like do it. Like experiment with your chart, play around with it. Like what does your midheaven energy actually look like? what does it look like to attune your business more closely to the energies of in your chart, whether it's like the second house or the sixth house or what have you. Um, and then, yeah, that's really it. I think you're going to find a lot more of the answers coming from intuitively inside of yourself more so than a chart or even like, from an astrologer. But working with an astrologer can be really helpful if
Yeah.
you're still struggling to like fill in those gaps, or if want support in just like holding space as you're moving through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all layered. And just a real quick example, just a personal example,
Mm-hmm.
just to give, it's not like one
Yeah.
thing, like
Yeah.
this most recent job that I quit, I accepted it and started it during Mercury retrograde, which at the time I was like, I'm not even going to subscribe to the whole, don't do it in Mercury retrograde.
Mm-hmm.
But, layer in human design, I asked for the job. I initiated when I'm not designed to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I came into my body and I could just feel it wasn't for me. And I trusted that intuitive, embodied knowing, right? And I left it. So, I mean, kind of to your point, like we can take all this and try and analyze it and what we should do based on astrology and this and the other thing. But at the end of the day, I think it is just coming in and trusting yourself. And I think that is important, like moving forward in the future, is just more of us need to be in that space, because I think we're the whole point, I think, of astrology and human design is really to get us from into that place in our body
Yeah.
versus overthinking and overanalyzing and the
Mm-hmm.
logic of what
Yeah.
we're so used to. So I think it's a beautiful process to even just like explore it and just let it kind of percolate in the back of your mind as you're navigating your life as you normally would.
Yeah. And even like breaking away from the noise of like, again, the pressures of what other people expect you to do or what
Mm,
other folks in your niche or your industry are doing. It's like maybe your astrology is telling you to not be afraid to like break away from that, to
yeah.
like be the pattern breaker, right? And to do
Mm-hmm.
something different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of this wisdom with everyone. And if there's any way that they can work with you, if you want to just let them know, and I'll of course have it in the show notes as well.
Of course. Yeah. So the best way to learn more about me and my like work within astrology and business is my own podcast. I host the Strategic Magic podcast every week. It's really cool. You can subscribe to it on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. And all the information for how we can work together is also available there as well. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.